Welcome to the Alien Probe Podcast. On Christmas Day, 1945, in the Appalachians, a devastating fire broke out at the residence of George and Jenny Sodder at around 1 a.m. 4 of the 10 Sodder children survived. One had been away fighting the war, but the other 5 disappeared from the house the night of the incident. Not a trace of any of their remains turned up in the aftermath, although authorities ruled the cause as faulty wiring. Mysterious occurrences in the days and hours leading up to the disaster, plus evidence of sabotage at the Sodder house, suggests something far more sinister than an accidental house fire. Today, joining me is Deb. How's it going, Deb?
It's going good, Doug.
My chair's still squeaking. What have you been up to? You've been away for a few weeks. Dr. Bill's pushed you out your slot.
Hey, Dr. Bill's doing a good job. I've got things to do. We've been furniture shopping. We've been buying new chairs for the living room. We've got important things to do around here.
Annabelle the dog sneezing.
We're joined by another dog here.
So, you can't tell me 5 children could burn up in that little house like that and nothing would be left.
No, this is a strange story. This is, the mom searched for these children, and it's a house fire. A house fire shouldn't make children disappear. So let's talk about the story.
So members of the Sodder family survived were George and Jenny, the parents, John 23, George Jr. 16, Marion 17, Sylvia 3, Joseph or Joe 21 was away at the army. So, what do you think? What do you think's going on here?
Well, the 5 of them disappeared. Were Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty. They were 14, 12, 9, 8, and 5. Those children just disappeared. I mean, how does that happen when the rest of them escaped, but there was no remains, there's no sign of them. So we start out with the story starts in Fayetteville, West Virginia. But George Sodder and his anti-fascist views.
Anti-fascist.
Because we're in 1908 here. They came to West Virginia in 1908 from Sardinia. And most of the community knew the Sodders as a respectable, upstanding family. George immigrated from Sardinia in 1908, and by the age of 50, he owned a truck hauling business. At the time of the disappearance, World War II had just ended on December 2nd, 1945. Only 8 months prior, communist partisans had killed fascist dictator Benito Mussolini, which left the Italians highly divided. Supporters of Mussolini were outraged. George was politically outspoken and held strong anti-fascist views about Mussolini, and consequently he had engendered bitter distrust amongst those of his fellow Italian immigrants who loved the Italian leader.
So we're thinking at this point that maybe something shady happened at the hands of others in the town because he
wasn't liked.
Yeah, he just generally wasn't liked because of political views. So it looked like in the months leading to the fire, a few strange encounters took place, and there was an unknown man that approached George at his home. Says he was looking for work. After George told him he didn't need any workers, the man looked up at the fuse box outside and said, "This is going to cause a fire someday." And the remark seemed odd since George recently had the power supply checked the electrical wires all checked out fine. Another notable visit took place at the Sodder house just weeks before. A local salesman tried to sell life insurance to them. I don't know where this house is. It's pretty.
It seems pretty remote, and yet
they got a lot of people rolling up on them,
stopping by.
Upon George looked, so somebody tried to sell him insurance, and George refused. And the exasperated salesman threatened, "Your goddamn house is going to go up in smoke." As a salesman, that's a really good technique.
I know. Excuse me, I'll go ahead and buy that life insurance.
Oh, never mind.
Now.
Let me go ahead and get it. Yeah, okay. And your children are going to be destroyed. You're going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini. Yeah, well, that's just...
That's a typical insurance salesman. That's, how they usually work. Not about giving you a gift and, asking you to buy insurance. It's more like...
Yeah, they'll close the deal. So just before Christmas, the older Sodder boys saw a suspicious car parked along Highway 21 for a few days in a row. And then the man inside the car was kind of watching the Sodder children.
Should have checked Megan's list for that guy.
Yeah, I know. No kidding.
And then the night before Christmas was frigidly cold. Jenny and George Sodder were ready to turn in for the evening with 3-year-old Sylvia at about 10:30. So I think Sylvia sleeps with the parents.
I thought she was 2.
She's 3.
She's 3.
The baby is 3.
Okay.
The oldest brought home some toys from the dime store where she worked and gave them to the younger kids for, it's Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they got to stay up a little bit later to play with their new toys. And then, of course, she reminded Maurice and Lewis that before you go to bed, shut the kitchen
coop and feed the cow.
Shut the chicken coop.
Shut the damn chicken coop or the fox will get it.
God, it's all we can do to take dogs out to pee.
I know, yeah.
And then about midnight, Jenny got a phone call, and when she answered, it was a woman that asked for an unknown name. And she said, Jenny, of course, later said that the woman had a really weird laugh, and that there were others laughing and clinking glasses in the background, because, again, it's Christmas Eve. And Jenny told the wrong lady she had the wrong number and didn't think much about it. And then everything's quiet. Marion's asleep on the couch. And Jenny noticed a bunch of doors were unlocked. The curtains were open, which the children are supposed to do before they go to bed. For some reason...
And they got to do that, too. They got to do the chicken coop. They got to feed...
There are 10 children. Can you imagine taking care of 10 children?
It's a crew. You don't have to do anything. You just send them all out to do it.
So Jenny went up, locked up, closed the shades, did this children's work. And it's Christmas Eve, you can give them a break. She assumed, the children are asleep in the attic. They must be everywhere in that house with 10 of them.
I hope it's a big house.
She went to bed. And about a half an hour after that, she woke up and said she heard something hit the roof like a rubber ball.
It's kind of like the storm here where we heard something, bouncing down.
Bouncing down the roof.
Didn't it sound like something when we had
there was so many things with that last windstorm. Probably neighbors flying around. She didn't pay much attention, went back to sleep, and in another half hour, she woke up and smelled some smoke. George and Jenny, with the baby, the 3-year-old, and Mary and John and George all got out. Unfortunately, the staircase to the attic had begun to fill up with fire. Oddly, when the Sodders yelled up to the attic, they heard no response from the younger children. Now, I think, as a parent, if the stairs are burned down, I don't go up. But if they're filled with smoke, I go up.
Yeah, you go get the kids.
I would just, put the towel over their head, I go up, and I look for my children. But they didn't. They ran to the bottom of the stairs.
Well, I guess they figured they had a lot of kids.
Well, they didn't, get over these, though. They kept looking for them.
Yeah.
They yelled and yelled. And then 2 of the boys came stumbling down with their hair all singed by the flames. And that was it. That's the only kids that showed up. And then as George is trying to rescue the kids, he remembered that there was a ladder that they always kept leaning on the side of the house. So
that sounds like me. I don't want to move it. How long's the ladder didn't been down by the pergola?
I know.
Yeah, I know. I'll get to that in a minute, but I'm going to leave the ladder here.
You realize you can no longer lift that ladder because weeds have grown into the ground now. So
the weather's better now. Okay, so I'll get it. I'll put it up.
Hopefully the Sodders kept a little better care of their ladders. So he went to that ladder, and it was gone. The ladder had. It was.
Somebody stole the ladder?
No, they found it later lying in a ditch down the road from the house. Somebody stole it. Well, I guess somebody stole it, but they didn't, steal it. They just moved it.
So, that's kind of weird.
Maybe it's one of those irresponsible kids who can't manage to close the windows before they go to bed.
They were too busy feeding the cows and, milking the chickens or whatever.
So now Marion tries to call the fire department. Her phone doesn't work. She has to run to a neighbor's house to call. And even then, an operator wasn't available. The operators are, it's Christmas Eve. Eventually, a good Samaritan got in touch with a
Shouldn't
fire
an
station.
operator be? Aren't they supposed to be
Always
always there?
But then some good Samaritan, we don't even talk about who this is, got in touch with the fire station from a phone in town. And then George tried again to re-enter the burning house by driving his work truck to the side and climbing over the top of them to the other window. Now the trucks won't start. All of them. Neither of his trucks would start. So
wow. Somebody pulled the distributor wire or something.
Their house burned to the ground in 45 minutes.
Holy shit. So what'd they find after the fire?
Well, the firefighters got there around 7 a.m.
Wait, when did this start?
Midnight. This was all in the middle of the night.
But the firefighters didn't get there till 7 around, and it started midnight. So where's the fire department?
I don't know.
State?
The only people
taking 7 hours.
The only people that can find the house are salesmen.
Wait, what time did the Good Samaritan call in?
They don't say a time. It just says that her phone wouldn't work. So she tried to call the fire department.
Oh, they didn't say a time.
No.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of weird. Okay.
And then at that point, got rubble and hot ashes. And they searched and searched for children until 11 a.m., but nothing turned up. The state police figured that the blaze was started due to faulty wiring, but later withdrew that statement. Then Fayetteville Fire Chief F.J. Morris conducted a thorough investigation and found nothing to contradict the ruling of faulty wires, nor any evidence of bodies. The funeral home owner, Charles Payne, went to the site the next day to collect bodies, but there were none. And years later, his wife, Velma, commented, Velma, of course it's Velma, it seems to be a mystery. Days after the blaze, the coroner put together an inquest consisting of a jury that would determine the cause of the fire. Interestingly, I love this part, one of the jury members was the man who told George his children would be destroyed and his house would burn down.
Well, isn't that a conflict of interest?
And
maybe you just didn't mention that when they did the screening.
Well, but, was George not aware of who was determining his fate?
I don't think you're there. When they're picking the jury, you're not there. And then you get there and you're sitting there going, what? Wait a minute.
I mean, George, you would think that George...
That dude threatened me.
George would have been allowed to testify in front of this jury. I mean, I don't know. I've never heard of a jury to find a cause. I always think, their job is guilty or not guilty, not how did something happen.
That guy was probably the foreman, too.
But shockingly, the jury also ruled that faulty wiring caused the fire. However, the Sodders did not.
So the jury ruled.
The jury ruled that the faulty wires caused the fire. So
they had an investigation and people and witnesses.
Well, it'd be just like a trial, but people would, I'm assuming, come forward with evidence. They must have been, shown evidence.
But the Sodders did not agree. It occurred to them that the house lights remained on for some time as they watched their home burn down.
Oh, God, that's horrific.
So they watched it. So it had nothing to do with the wire. Well, yeah, you could have faulty wiring.
And still
in one part of the house, the other house could have lights on, I suppose.
But his fuse box
is 1945 or whatever. I don't know.
And they've been here since 1908. But he said he just had it inspected, and we know inspectors never are wrong.
I don't think we're supposed to talk about that.
But George had just recently replaced the old wiring to install a new electric stove. Look at they're fancy.
Oh, wow. Well, they got a trillion kids. They got to cook a lot of food.
Oh, my God, how much food you'd have to cook.
It's a full-time job, food and laundry.
Yeah, the Sodders were just questioning this faulty wiring explanation. They still didn't believe it.
So, what else happened?
So we have some other suspicious events that happened around the house. A telephone repairman informed them that someone had cut the phone lines. That could be the reason Marion couldn't phone out. Well, yeah, the phone lines were cut.
Could be the reason.
Instead of, they thought that the phone lines were burned.
No, they didn't have cell phones. Oh, I see.
Yeah, they thought that they were burned, but then it turned out that they were cut. Neighbors saw a man stealing a block and tackle at the Sodder's place while the fire was raging. Oh, that's just a dick move.
Where do these people come from?
I know. I think of this.
They got the insurance salesman. They got the guy looking for work. They got the guy stealing his block. I mean, this place is happening.
And you're on fire and people are stealing your shit.
That's good cover. Come on,
Police later arrested the man, and he admitted that he climbed up and cut the phone wires, but he thought he'd cut the electrical cables. Why did he want to cut their electrical cables?
Why did he want to cut anything?
I know, but it appears he cut the phone wires instead. No one knows anything about what this arrest or why the police didn't, follow up.
The dude is obviously involved in this whole thing, and it's like, I don't know. I thought it was one wire, and I cut the other one. Oh, okay. Well, now we get it. Okay,
never mind.
Free to go. You're free to go.
You're good. Another witness was a bus driver working the late shift. Said he saw great balls of fire landing on the roof.
So they must be in a busy part of town or something.
But you also tracking. I mean, the pictures that we saw looks like
rural. Looks like they're rural, but there's a bus driving by.
Yeah, he saw balls of
great balls of
fire landing on the roof, and now, and at this point, they're thinking arson. Then came some more witnesses saying we saw the Sodder children.
Oh.
So there were a few sightings of the Sodder children that were reported. One girl claimed to have seen the children in a car driving away as the fire raged. So, okay, there are people all around this. This girl, saw 5 children in a car and didn't...
Nothing. That's weird.
And then someone working in a motel about 50 miles outside of Fayetteville claimed to have seen the children the day after the blaze. And then in a Charleston hotel, a woman said she saw the kids check in along with 2 women and 2 men of Italian heritage.
Whoa, how'd she tell? Were they just like swarthy? Dark?
You can tell.
They
were carrying pepperonis. I don't know.
Our Italian listeners are not going to appreciate that remark.
Well, how is this woman profiling these men?
Their breath smelled like something. And
her.
We're going to get offed.
Her quote was, just listen to me. The quote is, just stop talking. You're saying bad things. Her account, she's quoted as saying, the children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of Italian extraction. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile and refused to allow me to talk to these children. One of the men looked at me in a hostile manner. He turned around and began talking rapidly in Italian.
Oh, now that I get.
Now we know why they're Italian.
You're talking Italian. Okay, she could have led with that.
And then a missionary saw a picture of the children in the paper and claimed that he saw the children in a house in Cortez, Florida.
Boy, they're getting around.
That's just down the coast. A private detective who investigated this lead said that they were definitely there. But we're gone.
They were there, but gone.
But we're gone.
And we have no idea where they went.
Apparently, 5 different people saw these children in Cortez.
And they're just chilling, huh? I guess I'm away from my family.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is, in the 40s. I don't know how do you get in touch with somebody? They don't got a phone now because the phone lines are cut. So what are you going to do?
A pay phone. Reattach them and make some phone calls. So what about Jenny?
So
Jenny's searching for some clues.
She's searching for answers. Oh, Jenny did some experiments. She got her some animal bones.
Well, she's a scientist now.
She got her some animal bones and she put them in the wood stove, trying her best to get them to burn down. She was unable to reduce them to ashes.
Yeah. Do you realize when you do a cremation, you realize how hot that oven is? I mean, it's.
Yeah. Even in a cremation, you get chunks. You don't get pure ashes.
Yeah.
And so then Jenny read about another house fire in the newspaper where the house burned down and killed 7 family members. She knew she was onto something, because investigators there recovered the remains of all 7 bodies in that rubble.
So at this point, I'm thinking they were taken. What do you think?
Obviously they were taken. I mean, there's no way that you're gonna. I mean, she said Jenny went. Now she's talking to a crematorium worker.
Well, she had just. Are there no police officers around?
Jenny's
any
on it.
Detectives? We got Mama Jenny. Having to go do her own police work.
Well, they've already determined it's faulty wiring and your kid's burned. They don't care.
Yeah, most of her kids gone. She's got a lot of time on her hands.
You got 10, you lost half. That's The crematorium guy said that even at 2,000 degrees for 2 hours, you still have bones.
You were right. You just said that.
Yeah. Well,
How do you know that?
I've watched a lot of crime
shows.
shows.
Okay. That's right. CSI.
At September 11th attacks at Ground Zero, there were still human remains after the jet fuel fires. And so there's no way that, a 45-minute electrical fire is going to... it left appliances still, intact, but the children were incinerated. So now George and Jenny, they hired their own private investigator, C.C. Tinsley.
C.C.
Tinsley. He heard that Fire Chief Morris told some folks he found a heart at the scene and buried it in a dynamite box.
You don't say.
The detective contacted Morris and convinced the chief to show him the George.
Oh, everything.
They convinced the chief to show him the heart. Together they went to the site and they dug it up. Tinsley took the organ to a funeral director.
This is just hard.
It was a chunk of beef liver. Now, why in the hell?
Oh, that's a waste of beef liver right there, too.
Well, why in the hell would you put a heart in a box and bury it in the goddamn yard? This is stupid. So now George sent the liver to Washington for testing. And that document confirmed.
Can you think UPS?
It's beef liver.
UPS, can you pack this liver?
This organ's never been in a fire, because you know what? It'd be cooked if it was in a fire. Which indicate Morris placed it there sometimes later. Why? Rumors circulated that Morris admitted to a few folks he staged the organ in the rubble to pacify the Sodders. Oh, yeah, like this is going to
get them to stop investigating.
Evidently,
so there again, another person that's clearly involved in this kidnapping. And can we arrest him?
He just wants to shut George Sodder the hell up.
Quit Jenny's whining, I guess.
Yeah, you can just stop your investigating.
Stop investigating. Look, they're gone, okay?
Your child's heart is in a box in a field. What more do you
They obviously expired in the fire.
3 months later, little baby Sylvia, who's 3, right? She's playing in the rubble.
Just living there in a tent.
No, they visited their former home. Come on.
He's playing in the rubble.
Sylvia, they're visiting their former home, searching for clues. And little Sylvie, she found a hollow green object made of hard rubber. No. Stop.
Never mind.
It had a twist cap.
Oh.
And Sylvia wondered if that could have been the object that hit the roof. Remember they had
the ball on the roof.
Hard rubber, yeah. George took the strange item to the military officials. I guess we have military officials in the town. They told him it was an incendiary pineapple, more commonly known as a mapalm ball.
Everybody should have those.
So yeah, it's your kid's playing with a bomb now. And now in 1949, they hired a pathologist from Washington, D.C., Dr. Oscar B. Hunter. Oscar B. Hunter, Jr. A few days after the fire, George had covered the basement remains with several feet of dirt because he planned to turn the site into a memorial for the children. Okay, so...
Okay, wait. Okay, all right.
And then, so Dr. Hunter came and excavated the site and found some human vertebrae bones.
Vertebral bones.
That's vertebrae. And he sent these to the Smithsonian for some analysis.
The Smithsonian Institution for Analysis?
Yeah, and they determined that the age of the bones was inconsistent with the Sodder children.
Some other bones there. Obviously. Well, we don't care. Well, it's not the kids, but we don't really care what happened in this town.
These bones showed no signs of charring. And more than likely, these bones were in the fill dirt that he used to create his memorial.
Maybe.
So did you know when you get fill dirt, it's got chunks of bone in it?
If I found some vertebrae, what do you think? You think the police would say anything, or they'd be like, "Yeah, it's just fill dirt." It may have.
So when you bury a body in the backyard, just say those bones came with the fill dirt. God, I mean the neighbors are always getting dirt delivered. I bet they have bones all over that body of that backyard.
So it looks like Louis Sodder was found, or they think.
Well, then in '68, the Sodders received a letter in the mail. It had a photo of a grown-up young man who kind of resembled Louis Sodder. The postmark was from Kentucky. No return address.
It was from the guy that cut the wires. Quit looking for him. He's right here.
I'm not sure which wires I cut. Inside there was a message.
Red wire.
Lewis Sodder, I Love Brother Frankie, Lil Boys, and then A91032 or 35. It said that cryptic note. Nobody, as they thought maybe it was a cruel prank. Nobody really knows what it means.
Or it's a code that nobody on the planet could ever figure out. I don't know.
But it was still another strange twist in this tale. For 2 decades following the fire, George and Jenny would receive leads in the form of photos, anecdotes from people who claimed to have heard information about the incident. However, none of these proved reliable and only further obscured the story.
Really weird.
It is. In 1952, they put up a large billboard on Route 16 with pictures of the missing children and a $10,000 reward. This board remained for 37 years.
Holy crap.
In the end, they spent more than $15,000, which would be about $200,000 today, on a slew of private investigators and travel expenses across the country during their search. Well, there's the billboard. There's
the billboard with all the kids.
George and Jenny. That's so sad, though. I mean,
that is really sad.
It's one thing, because back then you lost a lot of kids to death, but just, the mystery is just, that's just a lot to
Are we thinking this is a revenge on George Sodder?
Well, there was some talk about that. Evidence alludes to a sinister criminal conspiracy. Everyone was aware several members of the Fayetteville Italian community had grievances with George. Uninvited visitors to their home foreshadowed what would eventually happen on Christmas Day. It's possible. Remember that late night phone call? That was to ensure that Jenny and George were awake to survive the impending fire. I guess these people, they have some conscience. They want to kidnap your children, but they don't want to kill you. Also, well, then who's going to take care of the other 5? Surely it cannot be a coincidence that the missing children were the ones who stayed up late to play. So I wonder if those kids were gone
before the fire even started.
Well, yeah, because remember she said that the doors and stuff were open, and she just assumed those kids were up in the attic. I mean, what if those children got,
They got somebody climbing through the window just gathering up kids?
Well, but because the daughter, the oldest one, was asleep on the couch.
Okay.
So if they took him out of the living room where those windows were open, you'd think. I mean, I don't know how big this house is. They don't give us really dimensions of, was this a huge house?
Well, if somebody's wandering around gathering children in the middle of the night and they don't make any noise, none of these kids make any. None of these. They took the middle. Yeah, the young in the middle.
Yeah.
And they didn't make any noise. I just envision them throwing sacks over their heads like you saw in those movies.
Yeah.
Just throwing a sack over their head, tying it.
But still, there's a come out of.
I'll kill you. Wow. If we could take them out of the house.
That oldest one laying on the couch. But it's weird that the kids didn't, I guess kids are irresponsible. And, not to close up the windows. That it's your job. Next thing you're going to let the chickens out of there.
Playing with my toys that I got in the 5 and dime on the way home.
Well, yeah, his sister brought him home to him. The most logical conclusion is that people hostile to George Sodder wanted him to suffer a painful lesson for the rest of his life. In other words, the circumstances scream foul play. To this day, of course, this is who they always blame it on. The Italian Mafia.
It's Italian Mafia. Because were they concerned about George talking shit about Mussolini?
They didn't like it. George was anti-Mussolini, and that's,
back in the 40s, that was a big deal. Yeah, you don't, everything was hush-hush, and especially with Italians, you don't mess around.
Yeah.
And I get that.
So, as of now, Sylvia Sodder Praxton is the last remaining member of the family. Her parents hope that the story and memory of the children could remain alive, and Sylvia has faithfully organized a memorial meeting in Fayetteville every year. Oh, wow. Sylvia will be 77. George Sodder died in 1969 at the age of 73. Wow, they lived a long time. Jenny Sodder passed away in 89 at 85 and continued to grow flowers at the site where the children disappear. The parents vowed to search for their children until their deaths, and they did.
It's a really sad story. And can you imagine? Your kids just disappear in the middle of the night, and presumably because your husband just couldn't keep his political views to himself. I mean, for the simple reason And even though it's back in that day, it's probably true. Okay, we're gonna,
Well, you could disappear somebody very easily back then. There wasn't even.
Yeah.
And people just didn't ask a lot of questions because they'll steal your children if you ask questions.
So you get people that comment. They say I think that they're probably in Italy, and no one knows and who knows what happened in Italy. George wouldn't talk about his youth. He hadn't told his own brother because his brother returned to Italy.
Oh, wow. So they didn't communicate?
No, maybe wrote what happened in the journals of diary. Maybe there were some notes left in Italy about what happened. Maybe his brother picked the kids up and brought them back. Who knows? I mean, it was clearly done by multiple people. Yeah, because one person is going to gather a bunch of screaming children. And it takes a lot to organize. These days, if something like this happens, somebody's going to talk.
Right. But, kids were really obedient back in the 40s, too.
They're not like today's kids.
Well, no. I mean, if an adult told a kid back then to do something, it's like, come here. I need you to do this right now. Kids really weren't. They were much more scared of adults because, you were allowed to smack them around.
It takes a lot of organizing and planning ahead to kidnap 5 children. Everybody, I don't know, it looks like everybody was intended, this person's saying everybody was intended to die in the fire, or at least the house burned down in the fire, but the children were not asleep.
Well, they probably stayed up late.
To play with their presents.
It's Christmas Eve. Who can sleep on Christmas Eve? It doesn't sound like they had like the whole, Christmas morning. This is. Yeah,
they were awake a lot longer than I think everybody thought. And
they caught the people that were trying to burn down the house.
Yeah.
Well, because they had to have heard, if something hit the roof with a loud noise and the mom heard it, those kids in the attic would definitely hear that. You'd think that they would hear that sound and think, maybe make a noise.
Yeah, it seems the telephone call is, the weird telephone call was to distract mom from hearing or seeing. I don't know. It's pretty well orchestrated, I got to say. But the kidnappers likely would want to get rid of them as soon as possible.
Well, yeah, I know. I mean, it's hard to travel with 5 kids and not be noticed if this thing was in the newspapers at all.
Yeah.
The thought that they were, sold into human trafficking or sex trafficking. God. Oh my God. Yeah, that's a horrible thought. And of course, they took the 5-year-old wouldn't cause a scene, and the 14-year-old isn't strong enough to fight.
Yeah.
And the bigger kids were left at home, and the baby was in bed with the parents.
And obviously, they left the 16, the 17, the 23 because they would put up the biggest fight.
Right.
2-year-old, was in with the. I think we determined.
Well, it sounds like they took her to bed, but there's somebody says that they couldn't.
Were they 2 or 3?
Well, it's
remember
3.
They said 3 earlier, but that was weird.
This at that point when you got 10, do you even know how old they are anymore? Sorry, that was me hitting the. Oh. I hit a fire.
I thought that was the neighbors. Our neighbors make a lot of noise. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's. And of course, DNA now. If they were to put Sylvia into a database, it would be interesting to know. But those kids would be so old at this point that there's not likely that their DNA is going to be out there. But some of their descendants, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's like now you get, you put yours in now. And then you see.
Oh, that would be so cool if you did your DNA and you had some, if you were maybe related to them.
Yeah.
So George's past in Italy is a complete mystery, right?
Yeah. A DNA search really couldn't really, scare up anything.
That would be so cool if they did start finding out.
And this person here in 20 thinks that it definitely was the mafia. This isn't me saying that.
For everything.
Dad was too outspoken. We know he was outspoken about Mussolini.
Right.
So we're going to move on now to. Here's a story I know you're familiar with, the Elisa Lam story.
Oh, the hotel story.
Yep, occurring in 2013. Elisa Lam's death is also the first of our topics that delves into the possibility I don't know if we'll have any time to go over topics, but we'll at least get Elisa Lam and another one into the possibility of the supernatural. Topic said, oh, wow. Either way, the young 21-year-old is shrouded with mystery and demands a closer look.
Well, this has been looked at a lot. I mean, there's,
Have you? Before this, I hadn't seen it, and then I saw it pop up the other day on a show.
Well, we started watching a movie about the Cecil Hotel. There's a lot of strange things that happen at the Cecil Hotel. And hers is the first episode in this. There's a Netflix series on some of this stuff that's pretty interesting. She arrived at the Cecil Hotel on January 26th of 2013. She was going to Santa Cruz on a solo trip around the West Coast. That's pretty brave for a young girl.
Yeah.
A getaway from her studies at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, where she is originally from. Her family was nervous about her being so far from home, and she was always sure to ease their fears by calling them every night to tell them about her adventures and how all went well and according to plan, of course, until January 31st. After that date, she never contacted her family ever again. On that final day at the Cecil Hotel, she failed to update her family, prompting them to grow concerned enough to call the hotel staff asking if they'd check on her. Upon examining her room, Elisa was nowhere to be found, and she had never officially checked out.
Oh, wow. The staff decided to look. Looks like the staff took a look at the security footage in an attempt to locate her and get an idea where she was seen. What they found would prompt more questions than answers. The hotel video showed Elisa in one of the elevators on the date of the disappearance acting kind of strange. In the footage, Lam can be seen stepping into the elevator and pushing all the floor buttons. That's weird.
Oh, that's annoying.
Isn't that something that kids do?
Yes, they do it, and then they run out and make it the elevator, so that nobody gets on the elevator.
Well, maybe that's what she wanted.
Oh, but then she steps in and out of the elevator. She pokes her head out sideways toward the hallways like somebody's following her. She peers out of the elevator a few times before stepping out of the elevator entirely, never to be seen again. So it sounds like she's like looking, thinking somebody's following her.
And then 2 weeks goes by, without even a development in the case. But hotel maintenance worker Santiago Lopez began to receive complaints about the water quality. That's not. When the water quality's bad, low water pressure, strange coloring, and a weird taste coming from the tap water were all reported. And he began to investigate.
No,
the hotel water tank.
No.
Upon opening the tank, Lopez sees Lam's rotting corpse.
I'm drinking bottled water for the rest of my life.
Yeah, we're never going to drink water from... Well, what do they do? Okay, the Cecil Hotel has its own water supply.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of interesting. So the rescuers try to remove Elisa's body from the water tank on the rooftop. Nobody knows how the corpse got there. It's floating lifelessly next to the same clothes she wore in the surveillance video. How she ended up in the hotel's water tank, or who else might even have been involved.
Well, there's got to be somebody. She didn't put herself in there. She didn't
jump in. Well, she was acting weird. Maybe she just,
and she closed,
end it all.
She closed the lid behind her.
I'm going to check out by jumping in the water tank. They didn't have a pool. Did you notice?
They didn't?
No.
Well, they should have.
Well,
this could have saved a lot.
Did she think it was a spa?
It was. I mean, how would she even open the door? She's a little lady. She's a young little girl.
It's obviously somebody helped her into the tank.
You think?
It was ruled to be impossible for Lam to have climbed in. Yeah, we determined that. And then closed the door by herself.
I don't think I need a degree for that.
So one of the final people to see Lam alive is the owner of a bookstore that she traveled to prior to her death. Katie Orphan, owner of the last bookstore, was quoted as saying, "It seemed like she had plans to return home, plans to give things to her family members and reconnect with them. She bought things to bring back to them."
Well, yeah, I think she was planning on completing her trip and seeing her family again.
So she gave a detailed description of how Lopez gave a detailed description.
Of how to get to the water tank.
Oh, Lopez, the maintenance guy.
Yeah.
And take the elevator to the 15th floor of the hotel before walking up the staircase to the roof. Then first turn off the rooftop alarm, which isn't he the maintenance guy? It seems to me that
he seems to know
he seems to know a lot about how to do all this.
The employees know the alarm.
This sounds
code.
like the Sodder thing. Hey, he's really involved, but we're really not going to do any investigating.
And then you would step right here, climb up on this platform,
jump in there. There's something.
Turn this handle 14 times.
Maybe he told her the spa was up there.
Uh-huh.
We have a spa.
I'll take you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to getting to this thing, and you finally climb another ladder to get to the top of the main tank.
Oh my God!
Oh, come on! In the end, it was really accidental.
It was an accident. She fell. So what are they saying? She fell into the water tank
and closed the door.
And closed the door behind her. No further pieces of evidence have surfaced since.
Because they didn't look for any.
Theorists point to the hotel's historically supernatural ties. Lam's bipolar disorder. We didn't know about that. That's part of that.
Yeah.
So later, subsequent medication. Third party a third party as
well,
possible.
There's definitely a third party. Come on.
Either way, I don't think we're ever going to really understand the circumstances of her death. It's
yeah.
So some questions not asked, and others never answered. At least not fully. Why did Elisa continue to stay at the Cecil? If her interest was to tour the coast and meet people, why not move on?
Well, I think she was...
These are for you.
Her plan was, when she got there, her plan was to move on to go to Santa Cruz, right?
Right.
So...
Did she stay there longer than she... Why did she stay? How long was she even there? We don't know.
I don't know.
If she was in contact with her family, did she tell them she was frightened or disturbed? Did they respond? If my daughter... I don't have a daughter, but if I had one, even if one of my sons called and said they were frightened or disturbed, I would be on the road immediately.
Yeah.
Or on a plane. There's video of her trying to get on the elevator on the 14th floor. Is that the only security video of her? Did she?
All they announced was the last.
Back in the day, I think it wasn't like elevators were the only things that.
Yeah. And I mean, she was probably on the elevator every day, but they just were looking to see the last. They only looked at the last video of her, and that's the day that she disappeared. They saw her getting on the elevator. I'm sure they didn't go to look at the day she was perfectly happy, because it's not really relevant.
Who was staying on the 14th floor at this time? I don't know if that's
Nobody
everybody.
And no, she didn't report anything. If she was frightened, did she go to the lobby and report it? No, because it sounds like if she's bipolar, that they really should announce that should be a part of the beginning, because bipolar people do react very, they're very up, they're very down. And so if she was, having an episode, that would explain what she was doing in the elevator. But there's no way in hell that woman put herself in a water tank and shut the door on herself. She's a little tiny girl.
Is there evidence someone like her called the police? I don't know what that would be. The police did a flyover of the roof to look for evidence right after. Did they do a flyover?
Yeah.
Did they take photos? Did they notice the lid had been removed? It was removed and put back, wasn't it? I mean, they're not going to see anything.
I mean, you'd think they flew over just as she was being put in? No. I don't think they flew over just as she was being put in. This all happened very quickly. She's a tiny girl. Somebody, whacked her over the head.
Well, she's probably not very large, so somebody could have just carried her. What did they do? They just killed her randomly? Yeah, well, of course that's what killers do, I guess.
Yeah, it's
and then to throw her in the it kind of leads me to believe that the maintenance guy may not have done it, because he would know that throwing a person in this tank eventually is going to be found.
Yeah.
I mean,
and how did she know the water tank lids were removable? How did she know that there were freaking water tanks?
She doesn't know. It wasn't an accident.
When's the last time you went on a hotel roof?
Yeah, I tried not to go up there, because that's where all the stuff they don't want you to see is.
I mean, you do think if she truly is bipolar and she's truly in an episode, because they're saying, wasn't there a better place to hide in this hotel? If you really are manic and you want to hide from somebody, I can see you opening a tank and getting in. I can't see you closing the lid over yourself. And if you're trying to save yourself, you probably don't submerge yourself in water. Because, they're a lot of times bipolar people are trying to hide.
Have a latch or something, because maybe she was dead when they threw her in there.
I don't even know if the little girl like her could lift a lid.
There's obviously a better place to hide in a hotel.
Yeah, see, that's what
Was she hiding?
That's what I said. I don't think she would hide in a tub of water. If it was like a closet or something, yes, because, if she's pressing all the buttons in the elevator, she's looking around like she thinks somebody's chasing her. Yes, she would be maybe looking for a place to hide. And maybe she went up on the roof and whatever, chased her, killed her, and, here's a good place to stash her body. I mean, they really didn't seem like they looked very hard to see, was she, sexually assaulted?
Right.
Was there, what was her cause of death? Was it drowning? They don't tell us a lot.
Yeah.
The police explanations for her nudity are not convincing.
I didn't.
Well, I don't know.
She was there with her clothes floating next to her. Is that what the deal?
She would have spent some time climbing the fire escape ladder and tank ladder, and spent some time exploring the area around the tank and on top of the tank, unless she had instructions from someone. So her scent would be on the fire escape ladder. What the hell?
I don't know who came up with this one. These are things that people have written in. By the way, this isn't us.
Does anyone know if the video of her in the elevator has been tampered with? No, of course we don't know that. We don't know anything. Those are all good questions, though.
Yeah. Want some answers?
I would love some answers.
Here's some answers. Number one, Elisa about her.
Oh, good. Okay.
Elisa continued to stay there because she needed a cheap place to stay. It was only 3 days. Then she was off to the next city.
Oh, good. Okay.
I don't remember what number two was. Number two was if she was in contact with her family, did she tell them she was frightened, etc. Did I already?
Go down further.
Number two was, good question. We did that answer.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's the answers here aren't exactly
the tanks
answers.
Are 10 feet high.
And not easy to get into.
But a young 20, I don't know that a young girl, these aren't great answers because there's
giant removable lids.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe there was a special party on the roof that night. She
wait a minute, I
wanted to go. Okay.
Wait a minute.
This is some conjecture right here.
Yeah, this is straight conjecture. We're not going to really bore everyone.
Well, somebody made up a whole little fan, like, how they do fan fiction.
Yeah, we're gonna do the boy and the next story. Okay, so we're gonna decide that. Okay. It maybe is a supernatural thing going on at the hotel.
Okay. Well, the Cecil Hotel is evil. We know that.
Yeah, and we may do a story on, the goings on at.
Well, we'll watch the rest of the Netflix.
The Cecil Hotel, do some research, and we'll do a segment on the Cecil Hotel itself. But let's visit the boy in the box.
The boy in the box.
Last case.
We're going to Pennsylvania. Specifically, Philadelphia, the Ivy Hill Cemetery in Cedar Brook. There's a small gravestone reading, "America's Unknown Child," homage to a young victim never to be named, claimed, or forgotten. Oh, there he is.
It was 1957. A young hunter sets out to check his traps near a park just north of Philadelphia. As he moves through the brush, he finds a tiny cardboard box lying discarded on the ground. Inside, the naked body of a small boy wrapped in a plaid blanket within a discarded baby's bassinet cardboard box. Fearing that the police would confiscate his illegal traps if he alerted them to the box. The way people think.
I know.
The young hunter ignores it and resumes hunting.
Of course.
Oh, of course he does.
Oh, my God.
Days later, a college student comes across the hunting grounds. Man, this should have been found a long time before this. And decides to unlock several of the traps in hopes of keeping the nearby animals safe. That's you. Yeah. Nobody's going to get caught.
You're not trapping my raccoons, mister.
He finds the box and alerts the police. When the investigation first began, police were hopeful. Described as having blue eyes, fair complexion, and medium to light brown, crudely cut hair, his nails were neatly trimmed. He had deep bruises covering much of his body, I hate hearing that, and face, and experts believe this was due to the cold weather. Or the weather causes bruising?
No. that due to the cold weather, the child may have been lying in the box between 2 to 3 days to 2 to 3 weeks. Such a young boy, determined to be between the ages of 4 and 6, had to have a family searching for him. And the police were prepared for fingerprint data to reveal his identity.
But they were wrong.
They were wrong.
In fact, the body showed several signs of abuse and mistreatment, like I said. Cold doesn't cause bruising.
No, the cold just meant he was preserved.
With the help of x-rays, several doctors determined the child had probably been under the age of 5, but he weighed just 30 pounds and stood at only 40 inches tall. According to a medical examiner, the boy in the box had the body of a child who was just over 2 years old. His hands and feet were wrinkled, indicating he was submerged in water for an extended time, just before or after he died. When they were compared to a national database and local hospital records, no results were ever found. Though the entire city of Philadelphia and the country spread his battered face, lovely, on over 400,000 flyers, on gas station billboards, on telephone poles, and bus stops. Thousands of leads led to no further information about the boy's identity. Sounds like his own family may have done this. Yeah. It's horrible. Several theories have popped up over the years. Investigators have explored the idea that the boy was a foster child who had died accidentally. I don't think so. Or perhaps that he was a human trafficking victim. That seems to be a popular reason these days, even for the Sodder thing. Experts agree that if the case had occurred 10 to 20 years ago, national news coverage and improvements in DNA evidence would have resulted in a closed case. Either way, it's incredibly tragic that such a young boy had his life stripped away from him and that no one had an answer for the crime.
That's
so what do you think about that? What do you think about these stories, Deb?
Oh, these stories are sad. It's Easter and it's sad. It's a sad, sad story.
Well, we had to, pick something uplifting for Easter,
thanks. Thanks for that.
It's like, thank you for listening to this installment of the Alien Probe podcast. This is Doug and Deb, and you can catch us on Alien Probe podcast at gmail.com, Alien Probe at Instagram, and certainly Alien Probe podcast at Gmail. You can send us your questions or comments, and we'll gladly return them. You will remain anonymous. Thanks to Robert Anthony, our producer. See you next time.